First of all, thank you so much for making the time to come through. I'm just gonna dive straight into it. Your background. Just give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. So background, I think, let's start with varsity. I studied economics and law, which was a fantastic double major, which gave me a good perspective. I then worked at an investment bank for a few years, particularly banking high net worth individuals. And that was important in understanding, how do high net worth individuals see the world? How do they build value? How do they run sustainable institutions? And how do they understand the power of money? Working with some of the directors and working for some of the directors of listed entities, you get an insight in how they kind of move and how they shape their relationship with wealth creation. And then I joined a management consulting firm where it was by and large focusing on kind of the people side of management consulting, so business process reengineering, executive search, coaching, mentoring, and all things related to unlocking people's potential. And that really got me to firstly work with the public sector, because that's where a lot of our clients were, working with ministers, DGs, and really high level professionals in the civil service. And then I actually did my MBA thereafter, full time through Gibbs, with a focus on entrepreneurship. And that was a tough 18 months. I wish that, all young people could have the option to be able to experience a post-grad, opportunity in a very strong institution like Gibbs. I think it just introduces you to colleagues and people who are high-performing professionals, where you get to really test your knowledge and also contribute to the body of knowledge in the world. I then went back to the management consulting firm, but was building a private equity styled investment company, because the challenge for us was we were not able to scale time. And consulting is a time-based revenue model, which, you can't scale time. There's only 24 hours in a day and so many days in a month, etc., etc. So the problem statement was, how do we convert our consulting capability into an investable asset that then can, leverage and build other companies that are in the scale business. So very exciting, built a business from scratch, and till today it's up and running and doing very well. So very proud of the work that we did there. And then moved into ICT, where I worked at one of the leading ICT firms, selling the full kind of stack into public sector, and again getting to interact with the likes of Eskom, Transnet, Department of Labor, Road Accident Fund, which are massive institutions with large ICT budgets, very complex. So learned a lot, especially because I don't have an IT background. And then my last corporate gig was at an insurance firm, the leading insurance company in Africa. They're the ones with the umbrella. I'm sure you know which one that is.
Mm-hmm.
But again, learning how to build businesses and how to grow in sectors that haven't been explored as yet. So taking their basket of products and tweaking them and getting them to be relevant.
Your background speaks of a fresh new outlook on South Africa. Then this is what my content speaks to. This is what we strive, as content producers nowadays, to really have an open mind to the solutions for some of the challenges in this country. Tell me, what did you find? There's you have a great mix of industrial experience, from banking to management consulting, to private equity, to more recent ICT and insurance. These are three or four very different types of businesses, however, that have a lot of influence. And also with SOs, that with your experience with having worked with SOEs, what did you find there? It's a loaded question. I just want, so that the listeners have got perspective in terms of, it's going to bring us to a better understanding of the type of people, the caliber within the RISE MZANSI. In your experience over the years, at policy making level, what were some of the things that you found and that brought you to this conviction of saying, I'm going to be a part of something new?
Mm. Yeah, so thanks for the question, Razi. So I think, the experience was an honor. We live in a country where employment is such a difficult thing to come about. I don't have to speak to the stats, and I'm sure you'll share anecdotally what those numbers look like. But, 1 in 3 people in South Africa are not employed. Adults who have got capability, energy, ideas, they just cannot get into the job market. And it's even more bleak for young people, where 2 in 3 people are sitting at home, not being able to exercise and actualize their ambition and talent. And so, having had these back-to-back opportunities to be able to, number one, study, get quality education, and then get into the world of work is something that was and is, incredibly powerful. And that's why I think I find myself here. It's true testament to the ideas that education matters and quality education matters. But moreover, being able to come from a family that is stable, having access to food, a roof over our head, are some of the very critical support elements that enable people to become professionals and to contribute. So those are kind of the foundational things that we overlook as we get into, the broader, more deeper concepts of the world of work. But let me get there. Competition is important. I think one of the things that really excites me about RISE MZANSI, but what I learned in business is strategy is about the response to competition. There are scarce resources. We live in a world where we constantly compete for those scarce resources. And so part of being RISE MZANSI and also the learnings that I've come from is the understanding of how you compete. What is it that you need as key ingredients in the world of competitiveness, all the way from a resource point of view as well as from a culture point of view. And I think that's one of the things that we need to answer, and I'm sure we'll do so over the course of this conversation, is what is South Africa's competitive response as a country in the world, in a global economy that's constantly looking to move its value and extract value from countries at large. So competition. Number 2 is the constant passion and commitment to learning. Throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to go to school, but outside the classroom and the lecture halls, one constantly interacts with information, with knowledge, with data, and must then, convert all of that into inputs that allow us to make choices and decisions that propel us forward in our individual capacities, but also in the organizations that we serve. And so RISE MZANSI, as well as myself, I'd like to believe that we are part of a learning culture, a learning organization that must unlearn, relearn consistently as we are dynamic and respond to a very, fast-paced world that's changing at an accelerated pace. The third is the importance of capital. Capital in a financial sense, intellectual capital, social capital, network capital, all the different versions of capital, and how one must understand how you first, develop and build that base of capital, and then how do you deploy it effectively to then advance that strategy that I spoke about initially. Capital is such an important part of building a resource base that then activates ideas and converts them into returns, either for the community in a political context or for shareholders in a business and corporate context. The fourth is the importance of people. People are absolutely important. Any organization differentiates itself on people. You will know from sporting teams to companies to NGOs, the power of an organization's ability to convert a vision and an idea into an outcome are the people that are part of that team across the board, from your executive structures all the way down to, the receptionist and the security personnel. Everybody matters. And so you want to build a formidable team, a high-performing team that's able to consistently show up and be aligned in terms of what is the purpose and the vision that we're trying to move towards. And the last one, and there's many more, but the one that speaks to me is around partnership and collaboration. both internally as well as externally. We live in modern economies and the modern world, and moreover, the interaction between people, technology, systems is a fundamental one in building value. And so partnerships internally and teamwork is very important, but then externally also much more important. A lot of the situations and questions we're trying to solve for are quite complex, and so partnerships allow you to have a very intersectional response to some of the challenges that one might face. And that's why we find multinationals, which are banks and ICT firms and telecoms, actually starting to work together to extract a lot more value rather than them trying to be everything to everyone.
Wonderful stuff. You have got a model which is obviously very different to our traditional politics, our traditional policies, and the regulations in place. It does definitely sound like something from a boardroom with a strategy, to either make a profit or find better means to provide a better product and service. Is this what's maybe lacking from the current solutions, of the leading party, the ANC? Why do you think they have consistently, let me say, performed under par?
I think you've nailed it on the head. When we started RISE MZANSI, we had to isolate what we thought the problem statement is. Any organization that gets established must respond to the question of what's our reason for existing and what problem are we solving. And for us, the key problem amongst the many is the fact that we've got a very weak, incompetent, uncaring political leadership. And I say political leadership because we must not paint everybody with the same brush. We've got some incredible professionals within our public sector, highly qualified, incredibly hardworking, self-sacrificing, deeply caring people who on a consistent basis show up to work and serve us as communities. But where we really, really have a deep lack is our political leadership. And that is why RISE MZANSI exists and why we've deposited the idea that we need new leaders. The professionalization of politics and political leadership is very important. If you look at leading countries that moved from being developing nations in being advanced nations, the likes of the Singapores, the Asian tigers, even some countries in Africa,
absolutely,
they've demonstrated that part of shifting countries from where they are into globally competitive countries is making sure that your political leadership structures have got highly competent people who have gone to school, people who understand how to solve complex problems, but who can compete like for like with their counterparts that they sit with at the table. And I think that is the lack of depth that we've got in our current political leadership, is that they just don't have what it takes to compete in the modern world. If you put them in a boardroom like for like, pound for pound with some of the leading nations out there, I think we consistently find ourselves wanting because we just haven't been able to cultivate the type of political leaders that will be able to deliver solutions in a complex world. And so absolutely, part of the proposition for RISE MZANSI is how do we get the very best to lead? And what are the structures and approaches to getting the best talent from society to have access to the opportunity to lead? When we did our candidate nomination process for people who will go to parliament and the various legislatures, we opened that up to the public. And then all the submissions that were made then underwent, number one, an examination, a test, and that was then shortlisted, and there was an interview process with a panel of highly competent and capable independent panelists, the likes of Dr. Stembile Mbete, Brigelia Bam, and many others, who then took us through, a rigorous process of being able to understand the space that we're entering, and therefore rank us based on our ability to compete. And so that is what I think has been missing. We've got this cadre deployment approach to politics that uses patronage and political history in order to, put people into positions of power. And I think we have shifted beyond that. I think we need a much more mature democracy, a much more mature political dispensation, where the very best in society are able to hold executive positions and able to direct the matters of the nation and deliver high quality outcomes.
The issue of it's a good thing we started off this topic talking about money. You guys have got a good thing going. The issue of SMEs in South Africa, we know how much a lot has been said, but very little improvement in the absorption of SMEs into the mainstream economy, and knowing very well that our SMEs are made up of the black middle class, who are the biggest spenders, but also the broken nucleus family. We don't find that anymore. So would you say that we have remained there because of a lack of innovative, young, fresh outlooks from the powers that be? The Constitution or the ANC plan has not worked?
Absolutely. The family for us is at the center of, our strategy for a RISE MZANSI government. You'll see it in our manifesto that that's where we start. After changing and fighting for better executive leadership, the next place we go is the family as an institution. We can speak until we're blue in our faces around Transnet, SABC, ESCOM, but the institution that really defines how people are able to operate as citizens is the family. And we know the historical impact of the violence of apartheid on family life, and how it completely decimated the basics of how do young children grow up to become successful human beings and citizens. That's where one of the areas we should start to rebuild. But you can't just build families on the back of nothing. You need a government, and you need a leadership that understands how you solve for that in a very meaningful way. For example, you talk about the middle class and you talk about family. We can't talk about SMEs if we're not solving for the first 1,000 days of a child or a human being's life. Those are the formative stages where you basically craft and build your ability to understand how the world works, and the building blocks of how you respond to stimulus and solve, problems on a daily basis. Now, the fact that we've got, 27% of young people, children under the age of 10, suffering from malnutrition and stunting, means that those children have got a far less, propensity to succeed, because they don't have the nutrition, the requisite nutrition for them to compete in school, to compete on the sports field, where we learn many interpersonal skills, etc., etc. So food and nutrition are the foundational elements of family life, but of economy. And that's why you'll see in our manifesto, we talk a bit about food and nutrition being a core area that we must solve for, because it also impacts the economy. So that's the first. The second is, the middle class family is suffering deeply from the cost of living. Continuously, if it's not the increase of petrol prices or the increase of electricity, the distance within which people must move between where they live and where they work, the rand consistently goes a lot less further every single month. And so it's no wonder that the middle class post-COVID has just been decimated. The numbers are completely scary of how many people have shifted from being what was termed or defined as the middle class to now literally being poor and not being able to survive. You know, they say that we are all 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty. You and I, if we do not get our paycheck at the end of this month or the following month, the amount of debt that we've accumulated means that we are not able to survive, and we literally fall into the poverty lines. And so we must solve for issues of the cost of living as part of solving for issues of the economy and business. And so, you know, those are some of the things that we talk about as RISE MZANSI, is looking at the family as an institution that must be resolved for, but then broadly dealing with the micro and macroeconomic conditions such that people are able to start businesses and that those businesses can be sustained, and that what they earn and the wealth that they build doesn't become eroded over time because of the cost of living and just, you know, the inability of their investments to be valuable over time.
This brings me to my next question. How do we now fix the conundrum of closing the gap between the very few super rich companies that are running South Africa's economy at hostage, to closing this gap to absorbing the SMEs, because this is an area where the government has failed. You know, there's a lot of young people that have got great outlooks, that have been educated well in this country. However, they give up in terms of entrepreneurship, and a nation that is not built by entrepreneurs can easily be a slave nation to a few, you know, which is what you have in South Africa. What do you guys aim to do to enable the absorption? And here I'm talking about the informal sector as well, which feeds millions of households in South Africa. How do we come up with a workable commercial plan for all African business people who want to trade?
Yeah, very good question. So corporates exist to make profit, and we live in a capitalist society. I think the role of government, particularly in a social democratic dispensation, which RISE MZANSI subscribes to, is it's not enough just to be a regulator of commerce and a regulator of markets. There has to be a progressive and intervention-styled leadership that must come from government. And so a few things that must happen is we have to define what our country's strategy is. You know, again, if you look at some of the leading countries, they know what their country wants to compete in. At this moment, I can't tell you what the South African country strategy is. You know, so there must be a plan and a strategy that says, as South Africa, this is what we're endowed with, this is what we're good at, this is what the world needs, and we're then going to produce this item and these services to the best of our ability so that we can export and build capital for the country. So that global and local competitiveness strategy does not exist, and it needs to be there, and it needs to be known by everybody, and all elements of society, from education to healthcare to, you know, all the elements should converge and kind of align to that outcome. The second is we have to then get to a point where we build high value goods and services. You know, if we're not able to compete based on high value goods, it means that we need scale in order to generate the same amount of revenue, which is GDP, than anybody else. And so building high value goods like technological goods, high value services is how you then enter the market and compete. The third thing, Lwazi, that we need to look at is the power of government is it receives taxes, right? That's why corporates, pay tax, and even individuals pay tax. What you then do with that investment, that tax money that sits over trillions of rands that sit in the coffers of government matters.
What happens?
And that's why you have to have...
What is happening to all that money in 12 months?
Well, look, a lot of it gets stolen, and that's why we've got an issue called corruption. In RISE MZANSI, we call it, it's not a victimless crime. It's actually a crime against the people, because when you steal money from tax, you're basically stealing clinics, you're stealing schools, you're stealing all the things that the society needs in order to survive. So that's what happens to it. And then some of it, which is deployed, does not realize the returns that we require. So you would know that our biggest expense item in terms of our budget is education, without a doubt, right? And yet we currently sit with a literacy rate where 8 out of 10 young people are not able to read for meaning. So we are spending billions of rands in a sector called education, and yet the outcomes that we generate is that 8 out of 10 young people are not able to read for meaning. We are at the lowest ranking in terms of maths, literacy, and science in the world. And yet we spend most of our money in that particular sector. So how are we going to be able to generate the outcomes we want when we're throwing money at the problem but not generating the desired outcomes? That's the cost of a failed leadership, is that we are wasting money and we're not getting South Africa to where it's supposed to be. And so taxation is an instrument that's supposed to be the rising tide that raises all ships, but it doesn't happen in South Africa because you've got a political leadership that doesn't have the ability to respond to the complex problems that we face.
What would RISE MZANSI do in that case? Sorry, I want to know, just give me what kind of solution would you guys present? Because I get the sense that you are very practical, you have an approach that is robust. Are you there, Tebza?
Yes, I am.
Sorry about that. I just gave us more time. Just give me some of the solutions that RISE MZANSI proposes with regards to that financial mismanagement.
Yeah, no, certainly. The first is, like I said, you have to put in capable leaders who have got the ethics and the understanding of governance in order to, deliver better outcomes. But I think I've spoken deeply about it. The second is, you do need a smaller government. You need a much more nimble, responsive government, which means taking some of the departments, consolidating, doing an audit of where do we believe we need government intervention, and where should we let other institutions and organizations take the lead. We currently have a very top-heavy government structure, which is deeply expensive and takes a lot of that tax money to paying salaries and paying for buildings and paying for cars and blue light brigades and all sorts of things. We can have a much more lean state machinery that is effective and delivers outcomes for its people. The third thing is, every business is located in a municipality. We cannot continue to have so many dysfunctional municipalities. We need the right kind of quality leadership, but that leadership also needs to be supported by professional services such as legal, finance, accounting, engineering, in order to be able to deliver basic services to people. When businesses don't have water and electricity, that's a fundamental breakdown of the core inputs of what commerce needs to succeed. You're not going to be able to have, you spoke about informal traders earlier on. You can't have, people who sell vegetables, butcheries. You can't have even funeral parlors when people don't have electricity and water, because things go to waste. And so people just decide, I'm not going to invest because I'm not going to generate the profits and the returns that I need. And therefore money leaves the country, or it goes into other spaces where it can get the return that it deserves. So solving for our local municipalities is absolutely crucial. The fourth is, we do need a proper infrastructure overhaul. I spoke about electricity and water. Roads are just as important. The movement of goods and services between point A and point B is one of the key elements of a growing economy. And currently, we've got an Eskom that doesn't work. We've got a Transnet that doesn't work. And in those two companies alone, we probably have got between 2 and 3% GDP that's waiting to be unlocked. And that growth would benefit informal traders, small, medium enterprises, and other businesses at large. And so until we fix Eskom and Transnet, we've got a huge challenge on our hands, let alone the water crisis that's looming, and that's going to be an issue for us even bigger than load shedding.
Sounds like
the next one is institution.
So you can carry on.
Institutions. Institutions matter, and they matter at different parts of building sectors. At the moment, we've got development finance institutions such as the IDC, the NEF, the PIC, who hold large quantums of money that, in our view, is not invested in the best way. We need high risk funds that are able to unlock the potential of small, medium enterprises. Every single time you speak to SME owners, entrepreneurs, one of the things they cry about is access to funding, access to capital, and then access to support, from research to being able to be upskilled, to support professional services such as legal, contracting, procurement, etc., etc. So if you do not have those institutions that at scale are able to dispense money, manage that money, and support entrepreneurs in order to succeed over time, you actually don't build a culture of entrepreneurship and a culture of risk-taking and a culture of building new industries where people can try things, and some of them might fail, but every once in a while you get to build a Facebook, you get to build a Tesla, you get to build a TikTok that generates massive value for the country, both locally and internationally. So we do need to take a risk on our people, because for 30 years they've been waiting for opportunities. They sit on many ideas, but they just don't have the support that they need. So those type of institutions are very key. If you want to be an entrepreneur in the agricultural space, you need to be understanding how is climate change affecting weather patterns, and how does that then impact, how you show up as a farmer. What type of seeds are you supposed to grow? How much water do they require? How do we respond to climate change and the climate crisis, so that when you invest in your crop, you get the yields that you require? So those are some of the support institutions and functions that are supposed to be inherited in a government that cares and that responds to wanting to grow the economy. Agriculture offers so much opportunity. The creative sector offers so much opportunity. And yet what happens is, what they do is they send underperforming ministers into the Ministry of Sports, Arts and Culture as a punishment, to say you weren't able to succeed in police, you didn't succeed in defense, and so go and you finish off your retirement in creative arts. And yet we've got one of the greatest exports. We've seen the likes of Black Coffee, Trevor Noah, Amapiano. Why is it we don't have an Amapiano global festival that comes here and opens up tourism and builds a platform for small, medium enterprises to plug into a festival like that also draws in, external capital in the form of dollars, as people travel here to come and have those. Coachella happens. You've got these big festivals that generate so much revenue and jobs for semi-skilled youth, but we don't have the courage and the belief in our own creative sector to invest in it in the same way. So building new industries like the creative sector, the water economy, is another big one. We should be training people up to solve for some of the huge water challenges that we have, from fixing leaking taps to dealing with some of the bulk water infrastructure, so that this looming water crisis becomes an opportunity for small, medium enterprises to plug into and solve for the problems that we have. So there's many other things, but those are just some of them that we're thinking about.
No, excellent stuff. What plan do you guys have for rural development in this country, where there's so much space still available?
Yeah, so I think the first is we must have a conversation with the private sector, and in sharing our vision, really start building a responsible culture around profit driving and the type of practices that will really deliver conscious capital. I think business inherently is not an evil thing. I think if it's governed and regulated effectively, you can generate, social outcomes that really benefit communities. And like you said, mining towns and mining companies, and not all of them, but in some instances, have been deeply extractive. They really take the minerals of from the earth, which are really minerals that belong to the people, value that belongs to the people, and not much then gets passed on to the communities, outside of, some CSI project where they build a school or, one or two other smaller interventions. So I think a deep conversation must be had around shared value. How do we build an economy and a relationship between capital, communities, and companies such that communities also benefit from the projects that are part of that community.
What would you do?
Again, pardon?
What would you do as RISE MZANSI? What would you do? What type of solutions would you offer? It does not have to be the whole country all at once. However, what type of solutions would you offer, given the chance, for an excellent, just let's say a 12-month run to make an impact in South Africa's rural development economics?
Yeah, so that was the point, is that we would first and foremost have a conversation with organized business. I think there's just been a breakdown of trust between government and organized business. And that organized business represents some of the biggest companies that we currently have, from financial institutions to engineering firms to all sorts of companies, right? So that is one of the first places we would start. The second is we would then, build what we will call economic zones for excellence, right? The understanding is that there's certain areas that are good for certain things. And we've seen this with the renewable sector, where provinces like the Northern Cape, which have got great energy for solar projects, have been able to benefit. But have we done enough? Have we built an entire value chain, that takes full advantage of the renewables ecosystem? I don't think so. The fact that yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want you to just elaborate that. I love what you said. You said develop what? Something about economic zones or hubs around these rural areas. Just go slowly over that and just explain what it would be like, because that sounds like something that would actually work. This is part of what I think China did as well. Just repeat that again and elaborate how it would be.
So it's economic zones for excellence, and it's about looking at what is the comparative advantage of a specific region, and how do you build an entire sector around that region. So like I said, the Northern Cape is very vast. It has got immense amount of value in terms of photovoltaic energy, which comes from the sun. And already, we've taken some advantage of it, but not fully. An extension of that is we should have built already battery factories in the Northern Cape.
Absolutely.
The Northern Cape should be the renewable energy economic zone. That's what they should be known for.
Right.
And therefore, the education system and the infrastructure and the technology and the partnerships and companies that operate in that province should be galvanizing themselves to making the Northern Cape the economic center of renewables. That's the thinking. The panels that we bring in and import should be made in the Northern Cape, because that's where the hub of activity should be. You've got vast land in the likes of the Eastern Cape, for example, which has got lots of water. It's got lots of what you call irrigable land, where you could plant many things. Cannabis being one of them, right? We now see that cannabis globally is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is utilized at an industrial level for medicinal purposes and in some instances recreational purposes. Why is it that the Eastern Cape, amongst other agricultural products, is not the cannabis capital of South Africa when it's got so much value to offer in that regard. It's because a lot of the money gets chowed through corruption, and you just don't have people who care enough about that province to say, this is what Eastern Cape is going to be known for. We are going to be the growers of food and the growers of cannabis and the cultivators of land and the cultivators of livestock better than any other province. And that's what we're going to be known for, and we will export from here because we do have got a harbor, and we will build that so that we take things into the world.
Can I step in there,
and that's what we will be known for.
I just want to step in there. In there to add on with a question. I get the sense, how real is the notion that in South Africa, progressively, gradually over the years, the last 20 years, there's been a very detrimental gap between the ability for government to have meaningful engagements with business entrepreneurs in South Africa. And I find that this could be another contributing factor to the huge gap that remains between our SMEs and the few conglomerates that run this country in terms of business. Is it because of that lack of trust between big business and government, and that has been eroded over the years? And what impact has something like that had on a country like South Africa?
When we started our campaign a few months ago, because we turned 1 year old on the 19th of April 2024.
Oh, wow.
One of the things that we started, so we're a very young organization, but we've been able to punch above our weight, that's what's possible when you've got really talented, passionate people.
You were born in the same month as South Africa's democracy.
Thank you. And it's testament to what is possible when you really have got the right people at the wheel. So one of the things that we started to do from the onset was to engage organized business, and they shared with us something that was truly unbelievable. They were like, we don't have consistent and frequent engagement with government officials. We were like, what do you mean? They were like, yeah, you guys are one of the first few, if not the only political party that's come through and is willing to have a conversation that's not about us voting for you, but about you understanding what are the complexities and issues that we're facing as organized business, and that we would like to, resolve so that we can both succeed. And they said, look, for us, there's a few very critical factors. The first is, if we do not solve for some of the basic infrastructural elements, we can't build businesses that succeed. Road infrastructure, power, and water. If we don't have those things, our businesses can't function. And well-working, functioning municipalities. The second thing they said is, we need policy certainty. Business thrives in certainty. That's how people are able to make investable decisions over a long period of time. Because if someone is going to open a factory and it's going to cost them $400 million, they want to know that you're not going to change your mind or change your policy on XYZ in the next 5 years, because it's not easy to just then pack up a factory and move it to another country. And so we've got multinationals sitting on tons of money waiting for policy certainty in certain elements in order for them to invest. And so without that, you've got a problem. Linked to that is also the stability of political leadership. This idea that you've got, presidents that get recalled every 4 years, you've got finance ministers that can come in for a weekend and then get fired, and then you've got a new finance minister, is not good for business. And so in the same way as you need policy certainty, you also need certainty in knowing that political officials and officials in government are going to remain relatively consistent and stable, because those are also the people that get to change things. And, midway to you getting a mining license, the DG changes and then the process has to start again. And that's deeply frustrating.
What impact has this had?
Is sitting on capital and is looking elsewhere to deploy that capital in order to generate the returns that they deserve. And so some of the other African countries like Rwanda and Kenya and Ghana are the beneficiaries of a failing South African government that's not able to build a fertile, investable market for entrepreneurs and for business people.
What can the black or the majority of the SMEs and the young people of this country that are looking forward to getting educated, what can they do in terms of planning better for the future of this country?
I think the first thing is we have to be better organized. And I'll give you an anecdote or an example is the creative sector. The creative sector will never be what it can be in this country until it organizes itself effectively. So number one, SMEs must get organized. I know there's the likes of NAFCOC and other kind of business chambers that do some of that organizing. But we need to demand a lot more better response from our government insofar as SMEs and how they are treated. I still can't tell you what the Ministry of Small Business does. I'm yet to kind of see a great success story that comes out of the establishment of that ministry, which is supposed to be, its core function is supposed to service and serve SMEs. I just can't tell you what some of their wins have been. And yet they get allocated a budget and they get allocated a space and they don't take full advantage of that space. So being organized and then demanding some of the outcomes that we desire, such as access to capital, funding, support, markets, is absolutely important. The other thing is we have to generate demand. And part of that is getting out there and starting to interact again with people who are potential customers. COVID completely decimated certain sectors of society, the eventing and conferencing space being part of that. I think part of generating demand is getting people to get out there again. It's making sure that we've got contact events, that we are building the idea that people need to go out and be in spaces again so that we can rebuild clubs, we can rebuild restaurants, we can rebuild places of convening, because for as long as people just stay on their phones and interact only on digital instruments, we're not able to build a sector, a lifestyle sector that can grow and absorb some of the small medium enterprises along its value chain. So those are some of the things, and then we must negotiate with big business. We must negotiate with big business around what are some of the ring-fenced opportunities that small businesses should and be prioritized to service. It cannot be that everything that is done, we must always compete with some of the bigger players. There must be some spaces that are safeguarded and protected for young businesses, small businesses to try out and continue to grow. So that's some of the work that we should be doing as small business.
Why aren't we using the arts as a tool for economic emancipation, and what would be your plan?
Well, I think it's because we just haven't been able to see the arts and creativity as our superpower, as a strategic lever that we can use to influence cultural capital globally, but also as a sector to compete in, which generates deep wealth. I think, like I said, we're a by the way sector that is, it's about kumbaya. We only show up at events and Imbongi comes and opens the show and you've got a choir that sings, and that's about as much that we recognize the arts for. But the arts is a deep sector with complexity, with lots of value that can be generated. Just look at what K-pop did for, the Koreas of this world, and how it completely transformed its ability to export culture to the world. The question we must ask ourselves is, what do we want the world to know about us? And once we can answer that question, we are able to develop a creative arts strategy that responds to that question. And that's how we then infuse content, strategy, tactics into that strategy so that we can get the outcomes that we desire. The interlock between the arts and culture department and tourism is a deep one. We are one of the most beautiful places in the world, and yet we still struggle to communicate that effectively and get the world to come here, bring their money, bring the intellectual capital, because when people come here and see how great we are, They then want to buy property. They want to open a company. They want to partner with people. And then all of a sudden, we've got new entrants and new, money coming into the economy, with creative industry being a gateway. So I think that's part of what has lacked. It's the deep sense and belief that the creative sector fundamentally is core to how we can compete globally, and should have a seat at the table alongside, energy, alongside tech, alongside all these other, new growing industries that are just as important. And then speaking about tech, we must also be mindful of the threat of tech and the opportunity of tech in the space of creativity. You spoke about being a creative entrepreneur, particularly as a content creator. The growth of AI and the growth of creative assets that are generated through robotics and the Internet of Things is something that is a threat to us, because we are not responding with the required speed to be able to understand how to use those assets for our benefit. And so if you're a photographer today, AI can do, AI generated images that are better than the photos that you take. And those images can be used by companies, they can be used by anybody who wants to build a catalog and tell a story through imagery. And if we don't then respond to that in effective measures, we close down our photography, and visual arts sector, because AI will then dominate that space. But it doesn't have to be that way if you've got leaders who understand how to convert this threat into an opportunity. So those are just some of the things that we should be thinking about and investing in, so that we can truly be a globally competitive country.
My last question to you, Tebogo. It's been such an insightful conversation with you. What would be your plan given the next 4 years if you find yourselves in a big coalition or at the helm?
I think healthcare is, maybe there's three things quickly. Number one is we must solve for primary healthcare. We need to make sure that we have, institutions or healthcare facilities as close to people as possible. For as long as people have to travel kilometers in order to get basic healthcare support, we are going to have a huge challenge. So we must invest in building primary healthcare support systems that make sure that people are sorted out before an ailment becomes a bigger issue. So that's number one. Number two is we must capacitate our healthcare sector. The fact that we've got over 800 doctors who are qualified post-ComServe, so they've done their community service, who are not able to be allocated to these primary healthcare facilities and hospitals is an indictment. How is it that in this country where healthcare is such a huge need and where waiting lines are like voting lines, that we don't and are not able to deploy doctors who are capable and trained into hospitals is, for me, it just puzzles me. So we must solve for being able to get people into the roles and the positions that they are deserving, so that they can serve and capacitate the healthcare system. And that's not just a people's thing, it's also a resource things like MRI scan machines and many other things that are required and necessary in hospital and healthcare facilities. The third is we do have an e-healthcare opportunity. A lot of what COVID taught us is you can solve many challenges in healthcare through electronic, platforms. So we need to enable our healthcare facilities and healthcare solutions to leverage technology in order to solve for some of the primary healthcare challenges that we currently have, and have things like pharmacies and the deployment and delivery of medicines leverage, platforms such as e-hailing platforms to deliver medicines in time. The post office could have been such a huge asset to this country in dealing with some of these challenges, but because that as well has tanked and is no longer a real thing, we can't even leverage that and its expansive network in offering us an opportunity in dealing with some of these issues. So those are just some of the opportunities and the approach that RISE MZANSI would take insofar as healthcare is concerned. In terms of education, look, I think education is such a massive and complicated sector. We would need an entire session on its own. Yeah. But number one, Infrastructure, again, is absolutely important. The fact that children still die in pit latrines on a daily basis 30 years after democracy is an embarrassment, and it shouldn't be the case. So it's not just about the schools, but the supporting infrastructure that's necessary. We need a deep nutrition policy and a deep nutrition plan that supports that, because a hungry child is not a learning child. So we should be making sure that we eliminate food hunger using schools as a platform to solve for that, not just for the kids, by the way, but also for some of their parents who are not able to have a nutritional meal on a daily basis. And I think partnering with the agricultural sector and even with corporates such as retailers in the food markets, we could really start dealing with some of the things like food wastage in dealing with some of the nutrition challenges that we have. So let's get our children fed and get them active and learning as effectively as possible. Technology is another opportunity. We need to have curriculum that is a lot more focused on future jobs, jobs such as cybersecurity, AI specialists, blockchain specialists, sales and marketing. We need to build an education sector that is aligned to that country strategy that I spoke about earlier on, so that our children have got the skills and experience that allow them to come out of school and be employable and to be able to compete with their African and global counterparts. It's important that we also support our educators. I think we need to build an educators sector that is a lot more connected, passionate, and upskilled to respond to the learning challenges of the day. And that must work in partnership with organized labor. The idea that we put organized labor before our children has always been a challenge for us. And we need a much better social compact between educators, between unions, and between the government, so that we don't have disruptions that then cost learning time and then affect children's ability to grow and become, educated professionals. And then we must build a pathway. We must build good pathways so that as kids come out of school, they've got various options aligned to some of the key areas of development, insofar as where can they find work readiness programs, en masse, in scale, and that are impactful. And then we must get them jobs. We must incentivize them to build businesses so that they can build, well-being for themselves and for their families. And those are just some of the things, but I think those are some of the major levers that we can look at.
Tebogo Moalusi, you are the convener for RISE MZANSI in Gauteng. It's been amazing, and I really do look forward to following up on the developments in the policy-making space with what you guys are doing. I think you guys have got easily, by far, the freshest futuristic outlook for any type of policy. And I love the fact that it's young people, it's a lot of it's multiracial, there's women at the leadership. I wish you guys all the best moving forward and into the elections.
Mr. Manrele, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a fantastic, riveting conversation. Thanks for the platform, and may it continue. Let's continue discussing. And I think more than questions, we also invite ideas. We know that many people think about some of these things on a daily basis, and they are subject matter experts. And we, as RISE MZANSI, invite continuous development of ideas and concepts. We don't want policy documents that sit on file 13 and never find the light of day. Let's make sure that our thinking and our capability collectively as a people starts to serve us, and I think RISE MZANSI is that vehicle and platform that will enable that.
Thank you very much. All the best for the future. I'll certainly be in touch.
Thank you, Lazi. Much appreciated.
Cheers, man. That is Tebogo Moalusi. Quite a refreshing, let me tell you, outlook. And it bodes well. It is a very good feeling knowing that these are some of the young people, young professionals who have decided to take the baton. Very refreshing conversation there. Coming up next week, I will be speaking to the African National Congress. It's goodbye for myself, Lwazi Kamangele, on to the other side.